Minister did take this commitment to the election, though. Essentially, he has a mandate for this. The Commonwealth's contribution so far is much more limited compared to the state government, around $2.2 billion. Asking the Audit Office to look at this, is this essentially a stunt?
Not at all, Trudy. Everyone thinks $2.2 billion these days is not a lot of money. It actually could build dozens of childcare centres, 6 new hospitals. I could go on with how the Commonwealth could use $2.2 billion better than it has. Just because you take something to the election doesn't mean you have to do it, particularly if it's not a good idea. And I've been very concerned since the election that the government has refused to put this project through a due diligence process on behalf of Commonwealth taxpayers. They ruled this project explicitly out of their infrastructure review that took them, that 120 odd days to complete. They also made moves in the Senate in that last week of Parliament to make sure that Infrastructure Australia didn't have to actually examine this project because of its size. And so at every step of the way, they've shielded this project from adequate scrutiny. So I've written to both Infrastructure Australia and obviously the Auditor General to actually undertake an examination so that the Commonwealth taxpayer can understand the risk this project poses. Because you say $2.2 billion, but this is an eye-watering project of in excess of $200 billion. And if you think Victoria is going to stump up that amount of money, you're kidding yourself, and you haven't had a look at Victoria's budget of late. So the Commonwealth is going to hold a lot of risk if this project goes ahead, and we're only doing the right thing by the taxpayer and our job to make sure it goes through some sort of process, because at the moment, just saying it's election commitment doesn't mean you should fund it.
Well, Bridget, let's see if the Audit Office take that suggestion up. We saw the front page of the Herald Sun this morning. As a Victorian yourself, the households there set to be slugged over $2,000 up front for a new gas connection. Businesses, it's over $30,000. Is that fair enough? This is about paying up front rather than spacing it out over time. It's not like it's free at the moment.
No, Trudy, it's not on at all. I mean, net zero by 2050 shouldn't mean that the poor and the disadvantaged pay a disproportionate cost of that transition. Everyone knows that gas is going to be one of the key transition fuels to a low emissions future. And for the Victorian government to suddenly say, sorry, Victorians, you're all going to have to go electric. You can't avail yourself of that abundant resource that we have here. We're going to ship it all overseas for their transition plans. Just beggars belief. And all the data available says it's going to put more stress on our grid. So what are you going to do when brownouts and blackouts occur here in Victoria as a result of that additional stress? Because the state government hasn't made sure that whilst they're withdrawing gas, that there is actually enough renewable energy in the system to take that uplift. So I think it's a really poor decision, and all the data shows it's going to negatively and disproportionately impact the poor, the disadvantaged and renters out there in Victoria, millions of them. And right now, at a cost of living crisis, I think it's just appalling decision.
Well, Bridget, finally, I just have to ask you about one of our other top stories. One of the 2 Australian men that's been killed by an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon was allegedly a fighter for Hezbollah, and that's according to that group. DFAT has told Australians not to travel to Lebanon in the past. Are we seeing the tragic consequences of what happens if you do go there, or should Israel have been more careful in what targets it chose?
Well, I think you're entering a war zone, and that is why DFAT gives very strong and clear advice to Australians about travelling to these types of areas and within these types of situations. Look, we don't know the full details of what actually occurred and what level of involvement these individuals had with the conflict. That will come out over time. But I think it is very concerning, the circumstances under which these individuals chose to enter this region and what their purpose for travel was, I think is going to have to come out over time. But right now, obviously, families have lost loved ones, and our sympathies are with them.
Yeah, we should be getting an update later this morning from the Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, so we'll bring that to our viewers. Bridget McKenzie, thanks so much for your time. Much appreciated during this normally quiet period between Christmas and New Year.